For those who lived out the history of the Bible, dreams gave insight and showed things that were to come. Joel 2, verse 28 stated, "And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions." Peter used this passage on the day of Pentecost. Acts 2 and 17 says, "And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." I will give you a couple of examples of dreams and visions from the scriptures, and even share a recent dream that I had, and I am waiting for an interpretation. Perhaps the most famous person we study for dreams is Joseph, with 6 dreams mentioned in total. 6 dreams conveyed in 3 pairs propel the story of Joseph and his rise from being the favored and thus despised son of Jacob to being the discerning and wise man appointed to manage Egypt during its 14 years of feast and famine. Joseph has 2 dreams. 2 of his fellow prisoners in Egypt each have a dream, and Pharaoh has a pair of dreams. The first pair sets the narrative in motion and points ahead to its destruction, while the second and third pairs are catalysts for Joseph's ascension. This is from Wendy Widler. What are the 6 dreams in the story of Joseph? Each of these dreams conveyed a story of what was to come. The first 2 dreams did not need an interpreter, in my opinion, due to the specific number of sheaves and stars. As the other dreams slowly happened, the resulting circumstances elevated Joseph to a position where we can see his first 2 dreams become a reality. The book of Daniel also tells of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2. Not only did Daniel have to interpret this dream, but he also had to repeat what the dream was in the first place. How would anybody be able to tell you what you have dreamed about and what it all meant? Joseph and Daniel relied on God and gave credit to the Lord. If we fail to give thanksgiving to the Lord for what he has accomplished in our life, we may take the credit for God's achievement. Nebuchadnezzar's dream was of the image made from various materials, but Daniel also had a prophetic dream about 4 great beasts and kingdoms that would one day come into the power. See Daniel chapter 7. He also had reference to a vision in chapter 8 and an angelic visitation with visions of things to come in the last days. Peter, who we had mentioned earlier, had a vision of his own. The accounts of Acts chapter 10 show us how the Lord prepared Peter to share the gospel with the Gentiles, or non-Jewish people. Jesus first offered salvation to the Jews as heirs of Abraham. In Acts chapter 13, verse 46, it says, "It was necessary that the word of God should first have been spoken to you, but seeing ye put it from you, and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life, lo, we turn to the Gentiles." This type of thinking was challenging to comprehend for early Jewish Christians who had also lived under the law. They did not associate with Gentiles, possibly due to them not following cleansing rituals. When Peter's vision was over and he made the trip to Cornelius' house, the events had convinced him that salvation was available to the Gentiles also because God had called them cleansed. It is interesting that God showed Peter this vision and spoke 3 times before it was over. I compare this to John chapter 21 when Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loves him. Peter affirms, and Jesus said, "Feed my lambs/sheep." It appears as though Peter may have had to hear it a few times before it clicked. I can relate to that. I have recently had a dream that I believe was from the Lord. I woke up after and recorded it to research the words and the language and ask trusted sources for a possible interpretation. My dream is as follows. I was at church making my way through a large crowd to find a seat When I arrived at a row of chairs and turned to go in, everything became as though it was in slow motion, and there were maybe 5 people scattered throughout the sanctuary. I looked around and asked, "What is going on, Lord?" And a bright light shined from the front of the auditorium near the ceiling. From a quick look at an aerial photo, this would be south or southwest, and it looked like the sun was peeking through the corner of the roof of the building. I heard a voice say, "When the sun sets on my target factory." This statement made absolutely no sense, so I asked to ensure that I had understood the spoken words. There was no response. I woke up, I asked God for the meaning of this dream, and I wrote it down so I would not forget it. This example is not my first dream from the Lord. I have had 3 or 4 in my almost 27 years of living for God. Each time I pass it along to find a possible understanding or a revelation that would help someone out. At one time, I had 2 dreams on the same night. I relayed those dreams to my pastor for interpretation, and he said he would reference a book on types of dreams and symbolism and try to decipher the meaning. If anything of note comes back from my current sources, I will let readers know in the comments. Am I comparing myself to Joseph or Daniel? No, not at all. My intention for this paper is to ignite something within the dreamers. God has poured out his spirit. Where are the dreamers? Where are the sons and daughters with a prophetic word for this generation? In this day, we need people with a vision, for where there is no vision, the people perish. Proverbs 29:18. So dream and do not be afraid to seek out an interpretation. Your dreams may unlock a mystery or a revelation into a need for this time.